going to talk about finance, and I just want to tell you the 5 lessons that we're going to have. For that matter, I'm kind of teasing about getting people from other classes. I don't mind if you say, I'm not interested in lesson number 4, so I'm going to go see what Mr. Armacost is teaching on that week or something like that. I don't want anybody to leave. The doors are locked. You can't leave. You have to get this lesson. So just so you can just kind of make a note, these are what we're going to be doing. And so tonight we're going to talk about work. Work is foundational to having decent finances. We have to have a good biblical understanding of work to understand finances well. And then in 2 weeks we'll have another session, and that one will be on just some principles, biblical principles about finances and money. I'm going to get out of order here, but I think the next week after that we'll have another Institute night, and that's going to be envelope budgeting. Envelope budgeting. And I'm not going to say when they are, but the next time we have Institute after that will be on inheritances and investing. And then the last week will be on wills, trusts, funerals. I don't know if we'll be able to cover all of that, but that's kind of the 5 things that I'm going to talk about for this session in finances. So, to begin with, let's talk about work. The Bible mentions work, or the idea of work, in the very first chapter of the Bible. Let's turn there to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. And we'll be looking, starting in verse 28. In verse 26, God says, let's make man in our image, after our likeness. Verse 27, it says, so God created man in his own image. And in verse 28, so God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over it, over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So, God gave Adam, in the very first chapter of the Bible, a job to do. His job was to replenish and fill the earth, but also to replenish the earth, to subdue it and have dominion over it. He's supposed to, and by subdue it, remember, this is a perfect creation. It's a perfect creation. So it wasn't like the earth was in rebellion. And yet, God told him to subdue the earth. He said, put the earth under your control and have dominion over it. Look at how far we've come. Okay? In not the way that the world thinks about them, but Adam was a caveman. Or maybe he didn't even have a cave to live in. I'm not saying he was probably, as Christians, we would believe that he's the most intelligent man that ever lived. Okay, so he wasn't a club caveman. But he didn't have a house. At least a house wasn't created for him. He was given the job to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. And everything that we see about us today that's progress is a result of that command. And all of that took work to do. It was jobs being done. And so all this progress, obviously there's some things since the fall that human beings do that we wouldn't praise, but generally the progress, the development of civilization is a result of mankind obeying this command in the very first chapter of the Bible, where God gave mankind a job. All of us have a job to do. All of us were created, besides other things, to do work. We're created to do work. If you don't believe that, let's look at chapter 2. In chapter 2, it's kind of a commentary on chapter 1. In chapter 2, verse 15, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So those are the things he was supposed to do there. He was to dress it and to keep it. Now this is a perfect garden. Should have, if it was perfect, in our fallen, lazy mind, a perfect garden wouldn't need any work done to it, would it? Now this is a perfect garden that needed to be kept and dressed. It needed work to be done on it. So the Lord gave him that job. And then he commanded, saying what they could eat. And then in verse 18, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a help meet for him. Now this has everything to do about marriage and a husband and a wife. But the wife's job, or the wife was created to be a help to the man. If the man didn't have anything to do, what would he need any help for? Okay, I'm not trying to be smart. This is the Bible. We're just thinking simply about the things that are there. There's a lot involved in the word help meet for him, but God created woman so that she could help the man do his job, do his work. Verse 20. And Adam gave names to all cattle and to the fowl of the air and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a help meet for him. Okay, so Adam had a job to do. He had work to do. He had a garden to tend and to take care of. And he needed help to do it. So the point we're making is that work, since the very beginning, even before man fell in rebellion, work is part of what we were created to do. We were created to work. Most people here, maybe everyone here, you can work. You can do things. But all of us, since chapter 3 of Genesis, we like not to work too. And we need, but the Bible teaches us, and it's right here from the start, that work is something we're created to. We shouldn't look at work as a curse. Work is not a curse. We had work to do and a job to do before the fall, before the curse of Genesis chapter 3. Let's go to Genesis chapter 3 then. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, we know in the beginning of the chapter, Eve, goes and wants to eat the fruit, and Satan beguiles her, and she eats the fruit and gives it to Adam, and he eats the fruit, and God comes to them, and they're hiding, and all of that. But we come then, and God says that Eve is going to have this happen to this change in her position and things, and to the man in verse 17. 3 verse 17, and unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake, in sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life, thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. And so in the curse, in the fall, in the judgment, we might say, of the fall, work becomes hard. It's my thinking, my belief, that before that time, work was enjoyable. It's easy enough to believe that because there's many times the work we do now is enjoyable. Okay? It was profitable. It was productive. There was nothing in the way of getting the job done, but there was still work to be done. So work is not the bad thing. The sin brings the curse of the ground. Now, when you do all that work in the garden, lo and behold, it's not wheat, it's weeds that comes up. The ground is cursed. And you're going to have to work harder in order to, before this, let's just say, before this, you hoe the ground and wheat comes up and you make food. Now, you have to work hard. You have to work so hard you're sweating to get the food to come up. In order to eat, you're going to have to work hard and sweat. Okay? Now, let's think about the idea of work. There are different categories of work, isn't there? Maybe my question isn't clear. What kinds of work are there? Okay, there's physical labor. That's the first we think of. I mean, hoeing, sweating, physical labor. Okay, what are some types of jobs that entail physical labor? Some of you might do those types of things. Landscaping, okay, gardening. That's very Genesis 1-ish. Okay? Construction, building things. That's very Genesis 1-ish. Ish. That's the latest way to talk about things, isn't it? Okay? But, right, we're to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. We don't have to lay out under the stars all of our life. We can build ourselves a house. We can put the creation to use because we have dominion over it. Hopefully, I'm trying to make this. I'm not just spouting off on working. These are biblical ideas. Okay, so constructing things, all kinds of physical labor. What other types of labor is there? Mental labor. There's mental labor, intellectual labor, but mental labor. Our mind. So our strength is used in work, and our mind is used in work. Lo and behold, and this is something that we should remember even today, that the more mental work we do, the more it changes the physical work that needs to be done. Okay? So I used to, before the fall, be able to just go and gather the crops. They took care of themselves. Now, sin comes into the world, and they're not, I just go out there and there's some crops and there's some weeds. And so I'm going to have to work. I'm going to pull the weeds out of the, but then I think, this could go a lot better if I did something beside using my hands. Here's a stick. I use that stick to break the ground up, right? And we're not going to go through the whole history of farming implements. Okay, but what happened? Mental labor changes us from being cavemen to having huge implements that are dozens of feet wide, plowing in one pass, breaking up the ground, planting the seed, fertilizing it, and probably two other things all the way, just in one pass with this huge tractor and the tractor is not, something that's pulled by horses. It's a what? 3,000 horsepower or something. You can't put 3,000 horses in, unless you're an Amish man. You got a tractor that's driven by a combustion engine. Where did that come from? Our minds. Okay, so mental work. Mental work it is hard also. But it's work. It's a different kind of work, and it really changes the type of physical work that gets done through history. And that just goes, and I'm pointing that out because for the last 100 years, especially in America, laborers have always fought to keep their job. They've always fought to keep their job. And one of the big things they fight against is innovation and technology. Listen, everybody could be well employed if we all had to grow our own crops. We wouldn't be eating nearly as well as we want to, but we'd all have a job. It would be right around our house. I mean, if we want everybody to be able to work, just make everybody produce their own food. But if we use our brains, I learn how to produce more food, and you like that because you'd rather your brain is geared a certain way so that you can do something else. So I produce the food for me and for you. And I don't mind that because you give me some money for the food I provide for you because you're making money, thinking hard, and making it easier for someone else to do their job or for me to do my job. Okay? So, in America, work, especially in America, workers generally, the people that represent work, let's just put it that way, unions. Unions are all about keeping our jobs. They fight against the management that tries to get this. Pretty soon we're going to have robots doing everything. What's wrong with that? We have robotic machines doing the work that it would take hundreds of laborers to do in a field. You get that big tractor up there and one person with a GPS could sit in his own house and have the machine do all of that. He could just program it. You know, ladies, you can get a Roomba, right? Do you want to sweep the house yourself? Or let the robot do it for you? Okay, I need to just keep going, but I want the idea that work, that mental work is a good thing also. Physical work, mental work. I'm not going to linger on these, but God creates us with about 4 different aspects to our lives, and I would say that there is even emotional work that has to be done. It's not really, most people don't, you think, are you legitimizing psychologists? Well, I'm a legitimizing mothers. Let's just put it that way. You ever do any emotional work? Or what about spiritual work? Is there spiritual work to be done? In the world that we live in the nasty now and now, most work we think about is mental, intellectual, and physical. But there is other work that needs to be done. We would work in all those areas. So, so that's creation. That's right from the very start. We were created to work. Now let's look to the New Testament. We're going to skip all the Old Testament. We'll come back to Proverbs at the end. But in the New Testament, teachings, we're going to pick out 5, 6 verses that are written to the churches. By all of these are Paul's epistles. So let's look. Let's just take them in the order that they're in our Bible. That'll make it quicker. Ephesians. First of all, go to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4. Find that myself. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. List here. This is just in a list of things you should put away lying. Don't be angry. And then verse 28, let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. Okay? So we should work in order to get, and we want to get so that we have in order to give. Work so that we can have in order that we can give. That's what the verse is saying there. Then, just still in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5, servants. Who's a servant? Is somebody that works for somebody else. How many of you are servants? Okay, we all work for somebody else. Okay, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh with fear and trembling. Okay, that doesn't have much to do with were, but here we go. In singleness of your heart, as unto Christ, not with eye service, as men pleasers. You know the people at work that just work when the person to please is in the room, right? Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as unto the Lord, or as to the Lord, and not to men, knowing that whatsoever good thing that any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. Okay, so we're taught as Christians to work and to do our work, whoever we're working for. It's not really that person. We are working for that person, but we are working that job as unto the Lord. This idea changed history. In the 1500s, people realized that the job they did was not for a master, it was for God. And this is because, and they realized that because the Bible was in their own language and they could start to read the Bible. So as a result of the Reformation, we have people saying, oh, this job is under God, I'm going to do my best. And while they were working hard, their brain was going too, and they thought there's probably a better way to do this. And that's why we have so much technological advancements from 1500 to now, whereas before that time there was not much. Anyway, let's just say Colossians 3:22 through 25 says generally the same thing as what we just read. That's what might be considered a parallel passage to the servants and masters passage. So 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians 4, verse 9, as touching brotherly love, ye need not that I write unto you, for yourselves are taught of God to love one another, and indeed you do it toward all the brethren that are in Macedonia. But we beseech you, brother, that you increase more and more, and that you study to be quiet and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you, that you may walk honestly toward them that are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. So work with your own hands so that you have lack of nothing, among other things. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, a couple pages over. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. So somebody that doesn't work at all, what do they end up doing? They sit around. They nowadays, they watch television. They are somehow, even without work, they've got a way to get on Facebook and just busybody. Listen to that, read that, and they just fill their heads with all kinds of uselessness. They're not minding their own business. They're not working. If you work, you don't have time to get into a lot of trouble. Let alone, our human nature still gets us into trouble, but there's less time to get wrapped up around other things that are none of our business. Mind your own business, he says. Pretty much. Working not at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such, we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. Then 1 Timothy chapter 2, maybe one page over, maybe in the same thing, chapter 2, verse 10. It's talking to, let's go to verse 9. In like manner also that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair or gold or pearls or costly array, but which becometh women of professing godliness. So they should adorn themselves not with fancy clothes, but with good works. Okay, now, I know we think of good works as a spiritual thing, but it's not just a spiritual thing. Good works are actually works, actually things that we're doing. And so, especially the ladies, and of course the men also, we're to adorn ourselves with good works, doing things, working things that are good. And then chapter 5, verse 10, also, speaking of widows, let not a widow be taken in, it says in verse 9, but unless she's 80 years old, having been the wife of one man, verse 10, well reported of for good works. She's brought up children, she's lodged strangers. Okay, so lots of things there that she should be doing that is work. So, we're created for work. The New Testament church members were commanded, were taught, exhorted to work. So, not working is rebellion. It's rebellion against what we were created in, which man rebelled right from the very start. Not necessarily about work, but that rebel seed in us not working is rebellion. It's a rebellion against what we're created and what we're called to do, or what we're commanded to do. We're to work. And that sin is called, when we don't work, that sin is called laziness. And we don't have time. We have 2 minutes. We don't have time. But the Proverbs then, okay, so we were in Genesis, New Testament. If you look in Proverbs, if you have a pen and would like to, there's just a lot of verses. Pastor Dameron is going over Proverbs in the other room. I don't know what there's so many topics there, he could pick anything. But Proverbs 21, 25, and 26. Proverbs 12, 27, 19, 24. Proverbs 15, 19. Why don't you turn to Proverbs 24? And if you're writing down, Proverbs 15, 19, Proverbs 26, 16, Proverbs 14, 23, Proverbs 12, 24, and let's look at Proverbs 24. So Proverbs 24, verse 30, there's way more even than that. But throughout Proverbs, the lazy man, he desires to have things, but he can't have them because he's lazy. The lazy man, maybe he'll go out and kill something, but he's so lazy he won't drag it into his house and dress it so that he can eat it. Okay, there's just lots of different things, lots of different descriptions of a lazy person. The lazy person is under tribute. So many things that the proverb says. And then we have this really neat, if we want to put it that way, example of a lazy person. And so the Bible tells us to look around. When we see a lazy person, learn from it. And here's a description of a lazy person here in Proverbs 24, verse 30. I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with thorns. Why? He didn't work. He didn't clean those thorns up. And nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. It had a stone wall, but it wasn't maintained. The stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travels. One that traveleth. And thy want as an armed man. The last minute, let's just think about that illustration. Just to help you understand how to study the Bible a little bit. Thy want will come as a man that travels. To us, we know when company's coming, don't we? But there was no telephones back then. There was hardly any mail service. Okay? In 1000 BC, how would a man come? How would you know that a man had traveled to be with you? When he showed up at the door, all of a sudden, boom, he's there. Whoa, where'd you come from? Long time no see. Okay? It says that's how your want will come. A lazy person, things will go smooth. You know, he's got a vineyard. He's got a wall around it. He just lets it go and lets it go and lets it go. He can live off of what he has for a while. And all of us have something, whether we got it from our parents, our family, or something, live off of what we have. But if you're lazy, all of a sudden it'll all be gone. Your poverty will come as one that travels, one that just shows up. And your want as an armed man. Does an armed man write you a letter and say, I'm coming on next Wednesday? No. He wants to surprise you. Okay? And that's how your want will come if you don't work. So work is something we're commanded to do, we're created to do, and there's so many illustrations in the Bible, especially throughout the Proverbs, exhortations not to be a lazy person, but to be a diligent, hardworking person. So we finished. So this week we've talked about work. Work is foundational. If you want to have good finances, if you don't want to want, if you don't want to be full of poverty, we can start by just making sure we know we have the biblical understanding of work and we obey and be a biblical person in relation to work. All right.